Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for being here, especially such a boiling day, 15th of July. We are close to 40 degrees, we chat a little bit before about these extreme temperatures we have in lately. You're brave, and your presence shows how meaningful for us is today's event. This is a really, truly occasion. It's not every day that we welcome a Nobel laureate, and certainly not one whose work has so profoundly shaped how we understand and fight poverty, one of the most pressing global challenges of our time. Professor Abhijit Banerjee has revolutionized the way we design and evaluate public policy by bringing scientific rigor and, in particular, experimental methods to the social sciences. Alongside Esther Duflo and Michael Kremer, he received the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2019 for pioneering the use of randomized controlled trials to evaluate the effectiveness of policy interventions aimed at reducing poverty. He is also one of the co-founders of the JPAL, a global research center based at MIT that works to ensure that policy decisions are informed by solid scientific evidence. JPAL has led groundbreaking research around the world and has helped shift the mindset from what should work to what actually works. Today, we are fortunate to hear Professor Banerjee's keynote address, in which he will reflect on some of these global experiences. And afterwards, during the roundtable, we will zoom in on Spain, where JPAL has successfully collaborated with the Ministry of Inclusion, Social Security and Migration to design and evaluate the minimum living income program, among others. We will also open the floor to explore new frontiers, such as the potential of experimental methods to evaluate science and innovation policies. Professor Banerjee, we are deeply grateful that you found time in your busy schedule to join us, and just before heading to Barcelona as well to meet the Catalonia's President Salvador Illa. Thank you for being here to inspire us. Professor Banerjee, the floor is absolutely yours now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really a genuine delight to be here. We live in a world, I mean, in particular those of us who live in the US, live in a country where the idea that, that there is a difference between sense and nonsense, and that there are methods to answer questions which do not necessarily reflect who's powerful, but also what is true, seems to be missing right now. We're under vast assault in all the sciences, and within that, to be in a Ministry of Science where, in a country where there is an attempt to really integrate scientific thinking into governance is really, it makes me happy and proud. Thank you. So we are, as was mentioned, we are a center at MIT, but also at many other universities. And at some maybe very crude level, the answer, what do? We promote the use of randomized controlled trials to evaluate policies, and I think that sounds like something that should have happened. Why wouldn't you use randomized controlled trials? But in fact, When I started working on it, this was, this was not the norm, or even nobody did it. And I think there was a lot of policy that was made based on, theories about people, theories about how things work, theories about how the world works. And a lot of those were basically intuitions. And the problem with intuitions is that they are often, they're based on what we have experienced. They might be honest responses, but they're often wrong. And combined with that, there was a great deal of talk, of course, but the talk was often at a very high level. So, education is good. Nobody would disagree with that, I think. The problem is, what do you mean by that in terms of policy? Which part of education? What do you need to do? Do you need textbooks? You need teachers? You need charts? You need a different way of teaching? What do you mean by education? And at some level, that's the kind of question that you in government use. It's not enough to be told that education is good. And what I think became more and more clear from as we worked on it was that that's where all the difference is there between the things that are this, but is it computers in the classroom? Is it a different method of teaching? And those are the kinds of questions where the theory really doesn't help you. You can kind of try to think about it in your head, but eventually it just doesn't help you very much. I think many of you here are from science, and many of you know what a randomized controlled trial is. It's simply, deciding that to test a program, we're going to assign it randomly to individuals, villages, areas, whatever the unit of that be, and then we will compare, because it's random and therefore the comparison is valid, we'll see which one performs better. And that's basically what we do. We got started 22 years ago, and in the last 22 years, there's been, I think probably by now 2,500 randomized controlled trials, and we are in 121 countries, not all of which I can name, and I think beyond that, I think one thing should be emphasized: we are not there as consultants. We're not there as experts who fly in. We're there as really a collaborative of 1,000 professors, and 1,000 professors who themselves do the research. So it is not a matter of commissioned research by someone who has to go out in 3 weeks. It is research over 1, 2, 3, 5, 17 years. In my case, I'm old enough to be able to say that, which is in-depth understanding of different programs. And beyond that, we work on almost every area that could be connected to poverty, which includes education and healthcare, of course, but also entrepreneurship or political economy or the environment. So we work on, without particular prejudice, on all of these things. Our vision of poverty is that it is not one problem, but many problems, and that you only solve poverty. Poverty in that sense is more like cancer. It's really many diseases, and you solve them one by one. And that's that particular mindset and that emphasis on details, on what specific aspect of education is what makes it stand out. I'll give you a couple of examples. This is one that, there was as I said before, theory is useful, theory is insightful, theory often tells us how to think about something. It doesn't tell us which of the different pieces that go into it is correct. It stops before we know the truth. It tells you how to think about the truth, but not the truth itself. And here's an example of where the theory can go wrong. This was a completely intuitive idea, and intuitive I put within air quotes. There was a lot of discrimination in France. There's still a lot of discrimination in France against people from non-traditional backgrounds. And the idea was that if you don't put their names on the resumes, then it'll be better, because then you can just, people won't know who it is. So you can, and so they did an experiment on that. And it turned out that anonymous resumes did not get callbacks. So people saw their resume, they said, there's no name on it. It's probably somebody who wants to hide their name. So they were much more, in fact, under business as usual, minority and majority resumes had a 2 percentage point difference. When you actually made them anonymous, the difference was 13 percentage points. So it completely, the intuition completely failed. And fortunately, the French government eventually abandoned the scheme. But it's a salutary example of something where we can spend as long as we want kind of theorizing this, but in the end, it is about it comes out when you see it. I'll give you another quick example. This is lots of different theories of education, of what makes education better. I already mentioned this. These are 3 programs, all studied in Asia. One is a remedial education program where you basically take children and teach them what they need to, if they can't read letters, even though they're in 4th grade, you teach them to read letters. The second one was an individually paced computer-assisted learning program where they were using, every child was given a tablet, and the child learned paced by the tablet. The third one was practicing reading. These programs all had positive, significant effects. But one of the things that we didn't know, we knew that they help, but when you do a randomized controlled trial, one other advantage is that you are doing it. So you can calculate how much it costs, because it's not something that's happening in a big system, and in the system many things get done at the same time. Here you can identify the cost, and because you can identify the cost, you can ask which one generates the biggest progress in education per dollar. And the answer is, even though, as you see, the computer-assisted learning program was better, it was much more expensive. So per dollar, the biggest gain comes from remedial education. And that's exactly one of the advantages of doing randomized controlled trials, is that you know the cost. And that changes perspective on what works. The third example I want to give is sort of a kind of, again, a very ideological background. People who, were, it was known that insecticide-treated bed nets save children who sleep under them. But there was a strong view that you should never give anything free, because if you give anything free, people will waste them. It could be true, theory, but somebody actually did an experiment, or a series of experiments. And in all the experiments, it turned out that whether you give them free or you price them, people, the fraction of children sleeping under them, given that you have a net, is the same. The only thing that happens when you charge a little price is parents don't buy it, so the children die. So when the experiment showed basically that it would be much better to give them free. And if you look at child mortality rates, this is one of the one of the sad things about this world where, there's this narrative not so much, not in Spain, because Spain has actually increased development spending, but in the US and UK, is that this development spending has failed. Look at those numbers. If that number, if you ask somebody in 1980, would you halve the child death rates, or now it's about a third of what it used to be in the next 40 years, I don't think anybody would have said yes. And I think what is remarkable is by using scientific approaches, the world has become a better place. I mean, and I think that we forget that too often and let the discourse of, nothing works go too far. This is sort of advertisement for us. We claim that we've been evaluating programs then change policy. When you aggregate those, we feel we count that 850 million people have been affected by programs that we evaluated and changed in one way or the other. Let me, what does this have to do with Spain? Well, let me give you a few examples of things you'll recognize as being immediately relevant. Is there unconditional cash transfers? Do they have effects on labor supply? There's actually a large literature from developing countries suggesting that there's not much effect on labor supply. If there's any, it's positive. People work harder when you give them money. In the richer countries, that this doesn't seem to be true. There is fairly limited evidence suggesting that the labor supply goes down somewhat, but people are happier. This is a question that is very relevant in Spain right now and should be studied more. This is the kind of thing that hopefully we can work together on. Conditional cash transfers work better than unconditional cash transfers, it seems. People, especially if you require training, and many kinds of complementary investments, work that we did a little bit with Spain's remarkable inclusion lab, shows that if you make the right complementary investments, then the anti-poverty programs work better. Another question in Spain, in fact, this is where a lot of our initial work started, was why aren't people taking up anti-poverty programs? And the answer is, well, we haven't fully solved that problem, but I think that it's clear from the randomized controlled trials that were done in Spain that people are more having to actually fill out forms and apply is difficult for people, especially people who don't have a lot of confidence in how the state operates. And if you make it easier, application assistance has substantial effects on the take-up of social benefits. Information also has effects, but not necessarily as large. This is a sort of the same thing in detail, and you can see that the application process increase the number of applications, help with the application, increase the number. The third issue, which again is very much something on which I think there's a lot of interest in Spain and many other countries, children from disadvantaged backgrounds don't do very well if they don't get early childhood support. And in the US in particular, this has been extensively studied, and disadvantaged children who were given assistance, access to early childhood education, 20 years later are working harder, making more money, and they've been tracked since the 1990s, and now you see them, they are less likely to be in jail. All the children from disadvantaged backgrounds seem to benefit from that. And I think that's also, there's some evidence also from Europe. Finally, this is an example of a university program. Children from disadvantaged backgrounds tend to not think that they're eligible for university. They underestimate their potential at university. And if you give them career counseling and this is a work and randomized control trial done in Italy, they become much more willing to enrollment in technical high schools, which are the high-end high schools. That these kids assumed that they couldn't do it because they were from these backgrounds and maybe only white kids get to do it. And when you look at the effect of that, it's enormous. The amount of progress you get 10 percentage points more people joining technical education. So that's and for females, you can see that the effect is not very big because girls were already trying more, but the boys were not. And that itself is interesting. And the immigrant boys gain in terms of academic performance as well. To close up and not take too much time, how can we work together? Well, I think the general principles, I think, are probably clear to you. I think programs need evaluations. I think intuition is often faulty. But also, governments need people who are good consumers of evidence. I think that's very important. I think consumption of evidence is critical. And one of the things we do is we have executive education, often tailored for particular, it could be 2 days or 5 days, depending on exactly who's involved, how busy they are. And those things make you both understand what good evidence is, but also what bad evidence is. And understanding what is bad evidence is critical in this process of using evidence also. Once you are there asking questions, JPAL acts as a resource. We are very happy to share the evidence that there is. And not just our evidence, the World Bank does randomized control trials, many other people do, and we tend to aggregate that information. And then we are very happy, and this is one of the things we do increasingly, is to work with government departments to scale up successful programs, to actually discuss what is it that has been shown to work, but how to do that at scale. You do something on an experimental level, people say that, well, that's special. But we have now many examples, that's why the 850 million number is there, where we actually managed to help governments across probably 50 countries now to actually do what the successful programs at scale. And finally, I think we are looking to become your partner, to get funding, but also to get open doors, encourage programs to be evaluated, connect us to people who are implementing those. We want to be more involved. I think I'm very proud of the work that we did with the Spanish government in the Inclusion Lab. And I think it's unique. It's the first time anything like that happened anywhere in the world, the scale of it. And I'm really proud of it, and I hope we can take this work further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. You can stay with us. Oh, thank you so much, Professor Banerjee. You can, if you want, sit down there and stay with us, because now it's time for the round table. So I'm going to start by inviting Maria Calle, Deputy Director of the Inclusion, Goals and Indicators from the Ministry of Inclusion, Social Security and Migrations. José Moisés Martín Carretero, Director General of the Spanish Innovation Agency. And last but not least, Leire Salazar, Senior Researcher, Institute for Public and Goods and Policies, Spanish National Research Council, CSIC. So now it's time to start. Oh, I just realized we have changed places. I will start by Maria Calle. Your ministry, as has been told, has been pioneer in Spain in applying rigorous evidence-based approaches to social policy, including the use of randomized clinical trials, control trials in collaboration with JPAL through the Inclusion Policies Laboratory. Could you tell us more about this collaboration and how it has helped shape or improve the design of inclusion policies in Spain?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So let me explain first a bit of how and why we built the Inclusion Policy Lab, and then I can give some idea of what are the next steps, what we're going to do next. So I want to go back to 2020 when the General Secretariat of Inclusion was created with the goal of developing a national minimum income scheme, the Ingreso Mínimo Vital. But since the beginning, the idea of the IMV, the Ingreso Mínimo Vital, was that it was not going to be only a cash transfer. As Professor Banerjee said, we were aware that it was necessary to accompany the benefit, the monetary benefit, with other inclusion policies to help people get out of the situation of poverty. The question was which of those possible policies were more effective. There were a lot of labor and inclusion policies that were applied by different governments, and we wanted to test and see which ones were more effective. There was also the issue that these policies in Spain are in the hands of the regional governments, so from the central government what we could do was promote this evaluation and help the regional governments to make informed decisions. Then also in 2020 was the pandemic, so we had the opportunity to use the Next Generation funds from the EU and the Recovery and Resilience Plan to design this policy lab and use this extraordinary funding to test new policies. The lab was created financing over 30 pilot projects where we test different types of policies in different areas like education and labor integration, social support and so on, with different target populations and different scopes. I want to talk a bit about the governance of the lab because we had a lot of stakeholders. First, as I mentioned, we were not responsible for implementing the policy, but it was regional and local governments and third sector organizations who were in charge of implementing them. They were also the ones who proposed to us what they wanted to test. We chose the more representatives or the more promising, and then we helped them design an evaluation program from these policies. And here is where our academic partners come into play. We collaborated with two institutions, with CENFI, the Centro de Estudios Monetarios y Financieros, an economic research institute depending on the Bank of Spain, and of course with JPAL. And our academic partners were involved since the beginning in the design phase up to the evaluation, and they really help us developing a theory of change for all the projects and selecting and defining the indicators to measure the impact with the data analysis in all the process. And in particular, JPAL was very important to give coherence to the whole project because, as I mentioned, there were a lot of different projects, so it was important to have common instruments to measure impact. Now the lab this first phase of the lab is finished because the Recovery and Resilience Plan has a very limited time frame. We have published 36 evaluation reports and a summary report with a lesson learned from the lab. And now we want to expand and continue with a second phase of the lab with two parts. On the first hand, to scale up the successful experiences. As the professor said, it's important now to apply what we learn. And we are in fact working in a project in the action framework of Doñana, which is a project to develop economically and socially the area around the National Park of Doñana. We are going to implement a scale-up of a successful experience from the lab in this area. And we are also trying to expand with new pilot projects, trying to test new areas or maybe refine the evaluation already performed. And for this, of course, we are also trying to find funding for these projects. But to sum up, I think for us it was also a very important experience, and we are very happy to be a reference in the area of evaluation of experimental evaluation of public policy, and in fact of leading this collaboration with academia for the evaluation from the government.
Just talking now about academia and public institutions and following this thread, I'm going just to ask you later, we have seen that these randomized controlled trials have a great potential, and it's been mentioned before, to inform public policies across many areas. But applying them into practice often requires certain conditions. Taking into account the institutional, social, and cultural particularities of Spain, what do you see as the main challenges to using these experimental methods in our country?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Eva. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here in such amazing company. I wanted to talk about three main challenges that, in my opinion, as a researcher coming more from the academic world, I observe. So the first one has to do with a certain still disconnection between the academic world and policy making in the context of a huge proliferation of data production exercises. So paradoxically, I find an inflation even of data production, small-scale data production exercises in the academic world. But these are increasingly fragmented, and they have very limited value. They are aimed at answering a very narrow, specific question, and it has little use or value for the rest of researchers, and of course, usually tends not to be actionable at all in terms of policy, right? So the good news is we are producing more and more data. That's always good news. And this is in the context of increased public investment in research, so that's double good news. Bad news is this proliferation has come, in my opinion, in a way due to the online data collection becoming cheaper and also more accessible, more intuitive to everyone. And in a way, this has led to some amateurism in the data production. So I'm a bit concerned as a person interested in design issues and methods. I think the bad news here is that we are maybe being less strict about the scientific quality of those data that are being produced. The quality is not assessed in some instances, ex ante or ex post. So I think we really need to look a bit more carefully at this data that we are producing in the academic sphere. Then I guess this could, in a way, call for increased collaboration with administration, and in particularly, again, this is a long-standing tradition in the social sciences, at least in academia, more collaboration to access, for instance, register administrative data, etc. So this is a way forward, in my opinion. More ambitious, integrated data operations in collaboration between the academic world and public administration, and of course, something that is likely or is capable of producing actionable policy instruments. So that was my first challenge. Then the second has to do with the need to increase trust in science in general, but also in this type of evidence-informed policy making, which I think is a very nice collective effort that we are doing here. So I would differentiate between trusting in science by citizens. How do we try to work on that? I observe increased cynicism. So people in Spain tend to trust less and less surveys and survey results. And it is also increasingly difficult to make citizens cooperate in surveys unless they are heavily incentivized. So I can, in a way, anticipate the risk that the more evidence we gather, which is good, right? We agree that we are collecting more data, and that's good to have more evidence. But the more reluctant citizens might be to the results or the findings that we get, and also the less reliable their input might be. They might be more prone to take it less seriously, right? This connects also with data anonymity and data protection concerns, which are, of course, also applicable to RCTs. So artificial intelligence, of course, we all know, can make up data directly, and that's a big concern for researchers, but it can also reconstruct individual level matrices just with simple tabulations. So that's something that we need to be aware of. And I think it also contributes to this disengagement or mistrust in scientific efforts in the general public. This was for citizens. For policy officers and practitioners, I think we really need to look at how to overcome the resistances towards this type of exercises. And I wonder whether they are maybe concerned by increased bureaucratization of their day-to-day jobs and increased protocols to grant accountability, etc. And also concerns about what happens with government turnover, how to set more permanent incentives for all sorts of administrations to pursue and continue this type of important exercises, how we can give ourselves a system that grants the stability in this culture. Of course, the fact that in Spain we have different levels of administration and some of the policies that we're interested in actually are implemented at the regional level, that doesn't make things easier. And then finally, for policymakers, there's this contradiction that we as scientists produce always small, nuanced findings and tend to be very cautious about what we find. How we communicate these very kind of complicated, nuanced messages to policy makers or to politicians when they actually are in need of very quick, straightforward, actionable recommendations. So that we have some lack of synchrony here. And then finally, because I was acting like the bad cop here, pointing to all these challenges, I would like to maybe signal that maybe big social challenges that we are facing, such as climate crisis or technological change, could be an opportunity for bold or bolder policy making. We saw this type of thing in the pandemic with IMV and job retention programs. So I was thinking whether we can start thinking about how to design, how to anticipate mitigation and adaptation measures, and particularly if we talk about poverty or those more disadvantaged, to those more exposed, for instance, by job loss or by natural catastrophes or heat waves, etc., or also those more vulnerable, more susceptible to these changes. So I was thinking that probably this will stir in the future a lot of research, hopefully with a strong causal identification nature, and in connection, of course, with policy making. Those were my three challenges, or two challenges and one opportunity, maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's not always easy to be a bad cop, and I think you did a great summary of all these challenges we have in front of us. Now, José Moisés, we would like to know if your agency, the Innovation Agency, has ever used this kind of methodology, and if so, in which way?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you in this meeting with Professor Banerjee. And well, the short answer is no. But let me explain. No? Just to put the audience in the context. The CDTI is the Spanish Agency for Innovation Funding. So we are a funding agency. We are not developing our own programs, but we are funding, supporting the programs that mainly firms and companies are doing in the field of technological innovation. That means that we are one of the bodies that are promoting this innovation policy in Spain. So within our strategy, we have a specific area of evaluation. This specific area of evaluation has their own strategy, and I'm glad to say that the evaluation programs of the CDTA was awarded by the Ministry of Public Administration with the National Award of Public Innovation last year. So we are happy and we are proud of this. And we have a long experience of evaluation, of program evaluation. But until now, we didn't made any kind of, we haven't made any kind of experimental methods to define and to evaluate these programs. But this is going to change this year. And this is the good, the good news.
This is a real announcement. We are getting excited.
In the framework of our new strategy, the CDTA strategy 2024-2027, we decided to introduce the experimental methods as a key element of our evaluation strategy at 3 levels. The first level is related, and this is relevant for us. The first level is concerning our own capacity building, because not all the institutions has the capacity to develop this kind of evaluations. This is the first point. So we want to generate internal and external capabilities to work in RCTs and other experiments. This is the first question, or the first issue. The second pillar is concerning the networking. That means that we know that we need partners to develop this kind of initiatives. These partners are, unfortunately, are not too much people in the world, so there is a lot of center for study, but not very specialized. So only GPAL and another 5, 10, maybe 10 groups can do this kind of work. We choose to work with the IGL, with the Innovation Growth Lab, which is a spin-off from Nesta, and we asked them to work with us. We joined the network of IGL. At this moment, we are one of the full members that we have. They have here in Spain, and this is the second part. So to work to generate this kind of network, and finally to start to do it. That means it's not a question of capabilities, it's not a question of making announcements, to start to do this. This year, we are going to start our first experimental methodology evaluation. It's quite interesting for us because when you are going to do this kind of experiments concerning public funding, it's very, very difficult in Spain. You know that we have this, I'm going to say that in Spanish, I will translate it into English later, which is we are talking about public funding, los experimentos se hacen con gaseosa. So we used to say that be careful with your experiments. So we are
with public funding.
So we try to find the right design of the experiment in order to be in compliance with all the regulations in Spain concerning public funding. And this is not easy.
We know.
For instance, can we define a control group with people who is not going to receive the money? We don't know. Can we, and this is relevant, can we choose different ways in an A/B test to generate an experiment with the same group of companies? Is complicated. So at the end of the day, just to gain experience, to choose the best way, we decided to work with an experiment. We call it a shadow experiment. Which we are going to work with companies that are doing at the same are working in the same framework, which is the Neotech program. We are going to choose different ways to evaluate the social impact of these companies. We are going to take lessons for that, and we are going to escalate the best way to evaluate this social impact. This is great, but we are going to do so in fully compliance with the law in Spain, and this is difficult at this moment because this is difficult because our funding law is not thought to do this kind of issues. So we have to find a way. 3 lessons for us in this process. The first one is the quality of the design of the experiments is really relevant. The improvisation is the worst enemy of this kind of projects. So you have to take this into account from the very beginning, as you did. You have to take this into account from the very beginning. First point. Second point, you have to guarantee the legal security and the equality of the citizens. And this is really relevant when you are doing this kind of experiments. Mainly for the public policy, because the public policy, you cannot discriminate. You have to work with all the people in the same way. And thirdly, and this is for us also relevant, is you have to use the evidence. We used to incorporate the evidence of our former evaluations in our policy design. We were used to do so. We want to do the same with this new experiment we are going to develop in the coming months. And we think that for that, we will need the 4th magic element of this kind of evaluations, is the political trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to gain the trust to show your results. If something is not working, you have to be confident in democracy to explain that your program can be improved. And for that, we need political trust. And we need a public opinion who is aware about the role of science in the design of public policy. And this is a challenge that we have to tackle, not only in Spain, not only in the United States, but all around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At a certain point, I thought that you were joining the challenging
For sure.
side, but it's good to hear that you're going to try. So just to close this round table, I just want to ask you, Professor Banerjee, you listened to the case, this beautiful collaboration to challenges that were introduced here, and this attempt, hopefully successful attempt that you will do, or they will do in the Innovation Agency. I would like to just sum up with your reflections. What would be the take-home messages that that you can give us based on the Spanish experience that we discussed today?
So I think there are many things were said. I empathize with most of them. I think, let me pick some highlights. I think one thing that's critical, and maybe so critical that it's worth repeating, is trust. But by trust, I think we want trust at all levels. I think this conversation of the idea that in a democracy you cannot reveal failure is I don't know that anybody's ever really tested it, because people are actually deeply cynical. So it's not that they assume everything is succeeding. So why can't we go to them and say, look, this time we'll be honest, and you can see if it works or not. I do feel that we haven't, and I don't mean Spain, I mean the whole world, hasn't done a good job of articulating just how complicated the problem of judging a program is. I think, and that should be a public, it requires a public presence and a public conversation. It's not a conversation just with policymakers, it's a conversation with the whole, entire public to say that, look, this is so much about, there was a moment where you might think that there is omnipotence and the government is is there, it knows everything, it will do the truth, but you don't believe it really. So why don't we start with a much more open setting where indeed there is possibility of failure, possibility of success, and possibility of then taking the success seriously. I think it's really it's a move that almost no country has even really seriously tried. I think people don't trust citizens enough, but I think citizens then don't trust the government enough. And I think we're in a place where being more candid would not hurt, because I think the level of cynicism is very profound. And so I don't think that we have much to lose by saying, look, we're doing this, we don't know whether it will work, but we are willing to learn and willing to take the results seriously. I think if somebody demonstrates that, it would be actually relatively revolutionary, I think. Second point related to that is, I think you mentioned the 36 studies. What is remarkable, and it shows that there is a lot of good judgment, and again, taking credit for is important. I think 32 of them had positive significant effects and properly done. So it was not, this is a rather remarkable fact. I mean, I don't know exactly how to sell it to the world, but it's a rather remarkable fact that the local governments that decided what they will do were deciding on things, not necessarily the best thing, but something that was good. And that itself is also a message, also an important message to deliver to the world, because it is one where, it is not that these people were just doing stupid things right and left, and that they did the program, they exposed themselves to an evaluation, and they found that the programs were successful. And that to me is, at that level, something like 90% of the programs worked, is actually a rather remarkable fact. And I don't think anybody knew that. I don't think we expected that. I don't think anybody had any reason to expect that, but as a fact, it's one that is worth highlighting. So it's rather remarkable, and it builds a conversation about, it's not, I think there's, I come from the US where, Elon Musk was firing people right and left without even asking what they do or knowing what they do. He fired the nuclear, lots of people were monitoring the nuclear reactors. One on Friday, when it was pointed out to him that that these were actually useful, on Monday they got rehired. But it was a level at which there's a whole weekend where the nuclear reactors were not being monitored. And so you can just to reassure you that they didn't blow up, but I think the level at which there is deep cynicism about the government, and including among very powerful people, is frightening and needs to be challenged. I think in the end, we are part of if we don't manage to establish this discourse where people say that, yes, okay, fine, maybe they'll fail, but at least they are looking at the evidence. The third thing is also related to what you said, which is that I think getting the evidence is easier when people actually believe it has some purpose. I think part of the problem culturally is that people don't know where the evidence goes. They don't know that it's used. In Indonesia, where the government is very punctilious about maybe using the evidence and saying this evidence is what we use for this program, people are much more aware that evidence is a critical part of government policy. We don't actually do that very well. We don't explain why we're collecting the data and why it's going to be important for them. And I think these are all, so I'm going to stop here, but I think these are all related points about, in a sense, marketing a view of the world, which is, I think, distinct from, let's say, Elon Musk's view, where there is, governments do many good things, and they have actually a hard time convincing people they're doing many good things, and I think we need to actually work harder on the convincing part. And randomized controlled trials, once people actually understand randomized controlled trials when you explain it to them. I started explaining to them in the mid-90s, and when you say that this is why you're doing it, they say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So I don't actually think we're that far from it, but we haven't put the effort. So I'm going to, on that maybe somewhat abstract point, I'll stop.
Thank you so much. We take this message home. Evidence, truths, they are words that they mean a lot. So thank you very much for your words and for being here, Professor Banerjee. Thank you very much, Leire Maria and Jose Moises, for this very interesting discussion and sharing your points of view. And now we conclude this round table, so you can go back to your places and we will end up. Thank you very much. We will end up this event by the closing remarks of our minister, the Minister of Science, Innovation and Universities, Diana Morant. So when everything is ready, it will take less than 1 minute. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
¿Servicio y merienda? ¿Servicio y merienda?
Muy buenas tardes. Profesor Banerjee, muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Yo voy a romper un poco la dinámica primero de las palabras que nos ha dedicado y la clase magistral del profesor Banerjee y de la propia mesa. Quizá de todos soy la que más se dedica a la política, aunque alguna persona que ya dedicada a la política como Mac estaba aquí sentada. Pero os voy a hablar desde la otra parte, ¿no? Desde cómo los políticos necesitamos de la evidencia científica para tomar decisiones. Yo fui alcaldesa y en el año 2018 padecí un incendio. Había muchos retos diarios, pero uno de ellos fue un incendio. Era un incendio que se había iniciado una noche de verano, era un 5 de agosto, con una tormenta seca y que cayeron del entorno de 100 y pico rayos y uno de ellos prendió en un incendio forestal. en medio de una gran superficie forestal y se convirtió en incendio forestal. Yo era alcaldesa de Gandía y el incendio fue a 20 y tantos kilómetros. Desde Gandía ni se veía el humo. Y me llamaron por teléfono desde un puesto de mando avanzado y me convocaron. Y me explicaron que había un escenario científico, un escenario que había previsto la EMET, por el cual el fuego, dadas determinadas circunstancias, podía entrar en Gandía en 3 urbanizaciones que están en la montaña. Era un escenario muy concreto para algo que estaba tan lejos que parecía imposible pues, ajustar tanto, ¿no? Y me recomendaron que tomara la decisión que estaba en mis manos, que era evacuar a la población de estas urbanizaciones. Y claro, ahí vienen las dudas, porque la gente no quiere dejar su casa, y menos ante un fuego que no ve. La gente cree que puede parar el fuego, que si está en su casa tendrá la capacidad de pararlo, de proteger su casa, que de alguna manera llegarán los servicios de emergencias y pararán aquello, pero nunca se quieren hacer a la idea de que se pueda cumplir ese escenario. Y en ese momento lo que hay que hacer es elegir entre la responsabilidad o la conveniencia. Y en política siempre hay que elegir la responsabilidad. Seguramente la decisión más conveniente habría sido dudar, esperar que aquello no ocurriera, mirar hacia otro lado, pero la responsable era, oye, esto puede ocurrir y está en mi mano tomar esta decisión. Pues yo volví a Gandía, os he dicho agosto, no sé, seguramente a Gandía, si la conocéis por algo, es por la playa, agosto, plena campaña de verano, todos los hoteles llenos, y yo saliendo como una histérica a decirle a la gente que tenía que salir de sus casas. Bueno, pues volví al día siguiente al puesto de mando y los bomberos decían, el incendio está incontrolado. Y yo salía de aquella reunión y hablaba con mi equipo y les decía, es que me han dicho que está incontrolado. Y me decía mi equipo de comunicación, ya, pero tú no puedes decir que está incontrolado porque vas a generar miedo. Digo, ya, pero es que yo necesito generar miedo, porque yo salgo con miedo y necesito que la gente tenga la misma información que tengo yo, porque si me quedo yo la información y no la traslado a la ciudadanía, pues seguramente va a haber un problema de desconfianza entre los que tomamos las decisiones y a los que les afectan, ¿no? Entonces, estuve durante 2 días, pues como os decía, ¿no?, sintiéndome un poco histérica, saliendo de los puestos de mando a 24 kilómetros de Gandía. Pues de repente, 2 días después, por la tarde, ocurrió lo que ahora ya llamamos reventón térmico. De repente el fuego hizo una columna de 20 metros de altura y empezó a volar por el aire como si fuera una manguera de fuego. No así como nos pensamos que va por los arbustos y coge un árbol y otro arbusto y otro árbol y que se propaga así. No, no, no. Saltaba carreteras, lo saltaba todo y en 5 minutos quemó las 3 urbanizaciones. En 5 minutos. Habría sido imposible tomar ninguna decisión en ese momento. Pero como teníamos las 3 urbanizaciones evacuadas desde hacía 2 días, se quemaron 100 casas. Es uno de los incendios con mayor volumen de propiedades privadas quemadas, pero no hubo ninguna víctima mortal. Os quiero recordar que aquellos fueron los años de los incendios de Grecia y de Portugal. En definitiva, en esto consiste hacer ciencia y tomar decisiones basadas en la evidencia científica. Cuando llegó la pandemia yo estaba de alcaldesa yo no formé parte de aquel equipo de gobierno que junto con el presidente del gobierno tomaron las grandes decisiones que a mí me siguen asombrando para bien y enorgulleciéndome de pertenecer a ese equipo que para mí es formidable. Llegó la pandemia y lo difícil es tomar decisiones cuando no hay un manual. Pero es difícil para los políticos, pero también para los científicos, porque la ciencia tiene sus tiempos, sus plazos, pero cuando le dices, no, pero es que yo esto lo tengo que decidir para mañana, ahí es donde tenemos que construir ese puente común y ese idioma nuevo en el que pues la ciencia traslade cuanto antes la información y los políticos tomemos decisiones. Pues nos enfrentábamos a la COVID-19, que desde luego era un reto sanitario, salvar vidas. Y poco a poco hubo construyéndose evidencia, que no la había. Está la directora del Instituto de Salud, Carlos III, y yo como ciudadana había días que me ponía guantes y luego no me ponía guantes. Y había días, ¿os acordáis de aquello? Y no pasa nada. Y no pasa nada. Yo creo que también esto hay que contárselo a la ciudadanía, que se tiene que ir construyendo evidencia científica y hay que ir asumiéndola, conociendo lo que significa hacer ciencia e innovar y resolver problemas nuevos y poner soluciones nuevas. Pero lo cierto es que con la COVID-19 el reto era, sobre todo, salvar la vida de la gente. La evidencia nos fue llevando a saber que lo que más salvaba la vida de la gente era evitar la movilidad. Entonces tuvimos que tomar decisiones muy difíciles, como hacer que la gente no pudiera salir de sus ciudades, que no pudiera salir de sus barrios. La primera, la de sus casas. Cerramos, recuerdo, 15 días a nivel empresarial, todos los sectores productivos menos los esenciales, aprovechando lo que se suele llamar la Semana Santa o la Pascua. Y todo aquello eran decisiones que la evidencia científica nos decía que servían para salvar vidas. Pero a la vez de salvar vidas teníamos que salvar la economía, porque no podíamos arriesgarnos tampoco a que todo se fuera al traste, ¿no? Y ahí se inventaron pues, grandes instrumentos de este país, como ha sido el ingreso mínimo vital, por ejemplo, que seguramente era un anhelo que tenía este país desde hacía muchos años, pero que se implementó ahí. Ayudas a autónomos, crédito SICO para las empresas. Bueno, en definitiva, ayudas a lo que se podía para equilibrar el daño o el impacto económico de la prioridad que volvía a ser salvar vidas, porque en una emergencia no se nos puede olvidar nunca que la prioridad es salvar vidas. Y mirad, yo fui alcaldesa en aquel momento y os decía, ¿no?, de Gandía, verano, me llamó la consellera de Sanidad en agosto y me dijo, Diana, vamos a cerrar los pubs en Gandía. Acordaros de que habíamos vuelto un poquito a la normalidad, habíamos empezado con las terrazas, con distancia y tal. Fui la primera ciudad de toda España que cerró pubs. En agosto. El agosto después de la pandemia. Claro, popular tampoco era, ¿eh? Pero mirad, para mí cualquier decisión, la que fuera, aunque fuera para salvar a una sola persona, a dos, porque esas personas eran la madre de alguien, la hermana de alguien, la hija de alguien, valía la pena. Y cerramos los pubs y luego nos siguieron todos los pubs de toda España. Con eso lo que quiero decir es que este gobierno, los que estamos en el gobierno, los que formamos parte del gobierno de España, con nuestro presidente Pedro Sánchez a la cabeza, abrazamos la ciencia. Porque es verdad que estamos en un momento, aquí se ha hablado de la política, ¿no? Y en general utilizamos pues, la política, ¿no? En la política hay políticos de muchas clases. Hay políticos que se dedican a generar desconfianza. Hay políticos antisistemas que se dedican a generar desconfianza en el sistema y en la política y se alimentan de eso para luego, desde la política, pues llevar hacia adelante sus proyectos interesados. Mira, si volvemos a la pandemia, Trump es aquel que decía que había que tomar lejía para combatir el COVID-19. Y ahora es presidente de los Estados Unidos. Entonces, no es que haya confianza o desconfianza en la política, es que hay políticos que sí que estamos comprometidos con la ciencia, con la evidencia científica, y otros que desde luego no. Lo estamos viendo, ¿no?, ahora también con la persecución a las entidades que hacen ciencia. Y este gobierno, el gobierno de Pedro Sánchez, ha creado instrumentos nuevos, como por ejemplo la Oficina Nacional de Asesoramiento Científico o la Oficina C, que asesoran científicamente a los políticos. Yo he estado de alcaldesa, ahora soy ministra. No hay nada más caro que una decisión tomada desde la ignorancia. Esa es muy cara porque no sirve para nada. Te vas a dar cuenta al cabo del tiempo de que ha sido un gasto inútil. Por tanto, invertir en ciencia para tomar decisiones es siempre un buen punto de partida. Y eso es lo que estamos haciendo. De hecho, el propio Plan de Recuperación, Transformación y Resiliencia, que también es un invento, es una nueva solución para salir de una crisis muy diferente a la de la crisis financiera, que fueron los recortes y la austeridad. De hecho, hoy en el Consejo de Ministros hemos aprobado la nueva oferta pública de empleo, la del año 2025, y vuelve a ser una oferta pública de empleo expansiva y reparadora para reparar los recortes que hubo en este país. Solo en ciencia se perdieron 10.000 plazas de investigador e investigadora en el sistema público de ciencia, 10.000 plazas que nos estamos dedicando a reconstruir porque consideramos que necesitamos ese sistema público de ciencia, igual que el de sanidad, igual que el de educación, servicios públicos al servicio de la ciudadanía. Y porque me he basado en las emergencias, podría irme a otras experiencias, pero somos conscientes de que no vamos a parar de necesitar la ciencia. Y me voy a ir a la última o la más reciente. Bueno, la más reciente sería el apagón y todo eso, pero me voy a ir quizás a la de mayor envergadura, que fue la Dana. Yo además soy valenciana, entonces me toca muy de cerca, la Dana. La Dana fue también una emergencia en la que la ciencia nos avisó. En la Dana teníamos información de que iba a haber una Dana que ya simplemente su definición ya advierte, y la alerta que se dispara con una Dana ya advierte de que las consecuencias pueden ser muy graves para la población. Con la Dana no se tomaron decisiones. A la gente la pilló en su casa, en la calle, volviendo del trabajo, en la cochera sacando el coche, porque no tenían la información, porque quien tenía que trasladar la información y tomar las decisiones no lo hizo. Es verdad que vivimos en un sistema complejo, lo decía antes la compañera del CSIC, en el que está el Gobierno de España, están los gobiernos autonómicos, y a la gente es difícil explicarle de qué compete a quién y quién tiene que tomar cada decisión. Pero claramente las competencias de protección civil en nuestro país están en las comunidades autónomas. Igual que a mí, como alcaldesa, se me avisó de un incendio para que evacuara, igual esta vez no se les ha avisado ni a los alcaldes ni a las alcaldesas ni a los vecinos para que evacuaran o para que tomaran las decisiones para salvaguardar sus vidas. Pero quiero que sepáis que la ciencia ha estado desde el primer momento también. Y aquí está la presidenta del CSIC, Eloísa, y está la directora del Instituto de Salud, Carlos III, y estuvimos desde el primer momento, con cosas muy importantes y muy relevantes. Es verdad que a veces escuchábamos, la propia presidenta del CSIC me decía, ministra, Diana, nos tenemos mucha confianza, y Diana, es que a veces escuchamos de los servicios de emergencia cosas como, bueno, ahora lo importante es lo urgente y luego lo otro ya vendrá. Había que tomar decisiones, por ejemplo, sobre qué hacer con los millones de toneladas de lodo. Todas esas imágenes que hemos visto de gente barriendo el lodo y tirándola al alcantarillado era lo que no había que hacer. Lo que no había que hacer era eso. Porque el sistema de alcantarillado colapsó, porque ese lodo hay que sacarlo de ahí, porque a poco que sepamos, sabemos que esos colectores y toda la materia orgánica de allí acabarán los ríos, acabarán los mares y acabará, por tanto, colapsando los sistemas naturales, eso sin que haya contaminación. Si hay contaminación, pues muchísimo peor, ¿no? Entonces, ese lodo, cuando lo sacábamos de allí, había que ponerlo en algún sitio. Y no valía cualquier suelo. Y era difícil explicarle a un alcalde o a una alcaldesa que la cuba tenía que llevar ese residuo a un terreno que estuviera totalmente permeabilizado para que no hubiese ninguna filtración que le pudiese afectar a futuro a los cultivos de alrededor, y que eso tenía que ser a 20 kilómetros y volver la cuba. Era imposible, porque para ellos necesitaban esa cuba y otra cuba y otra cuba y otra cuba, ¿entendéis, no? Y al final la gente lo que decía es que tardábamos. Pero es que a veces la solución a un tema tan complejo requiere de decisiones, que sepan y que conozcan toda la complejidad. Y yo aquí hoy quiero poner en valor a Eloísa, al CSIC, a los 150 investigadores e investigadoras que tuvimos allí desplegados. Y hemos hecho ciencia e innovación, porque incluso llamamos el propio CSIC y nosotros como gobierno llamamos a colegas de otros países que habían tenido inundaciones, Alemania, para saber qué habían hecho, pero allí no tienen garajes de 3 plantas. Y aquí las máquinas que chupan fango no llegan a 3 plantas. Entonces, inventaron un espesante de lodos para que en vez de sacar lodo, sacáramos ya mecánicamente y no con una chupona, que es como se llama estas máquinas de manera coloquial, esos lodos. Eso lo ha hecho el CSIC y en un tiempo récord. Y, por ejemplo, ahora hemos hecho otra cosa, estamos haciendo otra cosa, que es la reutilización de esos lodos, la revalorización de los lodos. Y muchas de las infraestructuras públicas que vamos a reconstruir en las poblaciones de la Dana, usaremos ese lodo ahora convertido en hormigón, en cemento, para poder construir. Así que, si os vale, yo creo que hay algo de esperanza. Y la esperanza, si me permitís, es que algunos elegimos entre el negacionismo y la ciencia. Algunos elegimos entre desmantelar lo público o fortalecer los servicios públicos, fortalecer los servicios públicos. Y algunos entre la antipolítica y la política elegimos la política. Y nosotros, nuestra política siempre va a estar del lado de la ciencia. Gracias.
Ahí, tienes ahí el papel y luego lo...